Good morning. I'm David Bragdon from Mayor Bloomberg's office. Welcome to New York. Innovative place. Many people attribute that to its very early days as a Dutch colony founded on the principles of commerce and openness and exchange of ideas and toleration. That is certainly what continues today. When we think about, well, why do we have cities in the first place? We have cities as places of exchange. Once upon a time, it was exchange of the guy who's got cowhides with the person who knows how to make sandals next to a market for sandals, or the combination of different types of physical goods. Of course, cities are about change. When the internet came along, people predicted, well, that's the end of cities. Now people can live in Taos, New Mexico, or wherever they want and communicate with each other. There are also predictions, well, the internet's going to be all about Big Brother. Well, in fact, both of those predictions, the opposite has actually happened. In fact, the internet has strengthened cities, made them even more vibrant, and that's what you're going to hear about today. It's also been a force for democracy and participation, and sure enough, customer service. Customer service is not something that is necessarily always associated with government, but in a city where the mayor believes in customer service and where the mayor has a background in technology, it has come to be synonymous, customer service and government. So what we're going to have the panel talk about today is how we in government share our data with your ingenuity, and how we have a partnership between the creativity of the private sector and developers with the richness of data that governments have. And of course, data by itself is not necessarily something that is of value unless it is interpreted, unless it's put in some form that people can find useful. The City of New York has a tremendous amount of data and measures a tremendous amount of things, ranging from school results to potholes to crime rates to all types of things. But getting that information out in a useful form does require this type of partnership. Some examples, and I'm not going to go too deep because you're going to hear much more specifically. Just recently, our Metropolitan Transportation Authority ended the MapQuest contest and a public voting. So in the weeks ahead, the results of that will be out, helping people to use the bus service or the subway service, so that we're no longer living in a world with this paradox that you can now sit in front of your computer in Queens and you can look at where missile silos are in Kazakhstan, but you may not know where the A train is down the street. I mean, it's a little bit paradoxical, and we're going to fix that. And the other thing happening right now is the Big Apps 3.0, which is a city contest jointly sponsored, and again, interagency cooperation being a hallmark of a lot of what Mayor Bloomberg does. This one is a partnership of the Economic Development Corporation and the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications, recognizing again that economic development and growth goes along with customer service and quality of life to our taxpayers and citizens. And the goal of the Big Apps 3.0, the sort of mission statement, again, a little uncharacteristic. You wouldn't necessarily think of this coming from government, but here it is: make it easier and more fun to visit, live, and work in New York City. Now, when have you had a government saying, part of our job working with you is to make things easier and more fun? So, deadline for that one, January 25th, $50,000 in prizes. There's a whole variety that's out there already in terms of you can use Seen Near Me and say, okay, well, I'm at 59th, I'm at Columbus Circle, and what movies were filmed here over the years? Others are, what did this place look like in 1912? So historical things, but then also the more practical things. How do I report that there's a litter bin that's overflowing? Where can I find the nearest health office for the city to have my blood pressure checked? All of those sorts of things. So we have a great panel talk about how we integrate all of the application development into the work of government. So I'll turn it over to them now. Great. Thanks and welcome again.
Thank you, David. My name is Skip Newberry. I am currently the president of the Software Association of Oregon, and just recently I was also the economic development advisor to Mayor Adams in the city of Portland, where I worked on a number of open government and sort of Gov 2.0 projects around data and civic engagement. Now we have a great panel with us here today. I want to introduce Bob Richardson, who's the Director of Strategy and Technology Development for the City of New York, and also Jeff Marreth, who's a Senior Advisor at the Office of the New York Public Advocate. And then we also have Andrew Hoppin with us, who was the former New York State Senate CIO, and he's currently a consultant both to the City of New York as well as other cities around the country, and he has a new company called New Amsterdam Ideas. You'll be hearing from each of us in turn about specific projects that we think highlight some of the work that is kind of cutting edge, where cities are trying to, in essence, push the envelope and make it easier for people to engage with their government. As David Bragdon pointed out, in the last 3 to 5 years, there's been a bit of a sea change, if you will, in the willingness of governments, especially at the local level, to start to look at how can they be more open and more accessible to citizens. And so that's something that we're going to talk a little bit about today as part of this panel, Apps for Change. I'm going to start off talking a little bit about a project that I worked on while at the mayor's office in Portland. And back in 2009, we started with both an open data initiative as well as an apps contest that we created on top of that data initiative. And the contest, as well as the data initiative, were called Civic Apps. And what we did is we targeted the relatively vibrant, independent application developer community in the city of Portland to try and leverage their skill sets and their interest from a civic standpoint in trying to make government perform better. And we started with a process that was regional, actually because it had to be. We have a number of overlapping local governmental jurisdictions in the greater Portland area. And so we started with the transit agency, with TriMet, with Metro, which is a regional government. We also worked with, obviously, the city of Portland, the county, and a couple of other jurisdictions for good measure. We all decided to open up our data at about the same time, and each of us had control over different data sets. We standardized all those data sets and offered them through a single website in a standardized format. And the thing that I would say we kind of fell short on was marketing, was reaching the average Portlander with both the data and the apps that were created. Now, I think where we succeeded was we connected with the app developer community in Portland, and we were able to get a good collection of roughly 20 or so apps out of the first round of the contest that focused on everything from, a transit tracker for buses and public transportation, a hyper-local app on finding food carts throughout the city. And so there were a number of things that were nice, but we didn't do a good job of necessarily communicating out to the average Portlander the value of both the data and the apps. So transition a little bit to 1 year later, and we migrated from a standard sort of apps contest model to individual hackathons that lasted a day or two on specific topics of interest to the community. So we sourced ideas from the community in terms of different problems of a civic nature that they found important. And the most important ones that bubbled up, according to an online voting procedure, then were turned into hackathons. So we had hackathons around education, we had them around geolocation, and apps resulted from that. We've also had some companies that formed out of those hackathons. For example, Geoloki, which is a company that has been presenting here today with Amber and Aaron from Portland. They kind of coalesced their business idea around the geolocation hackathon that was held as part of Civic Apps. And interestingly enough, they also got funding from a city seed fund that we had helped create shortly thereafter. So that's a great story. A little bit of an aside, though. So what we ended up doing was saying, okay, Civic Apps, great in reaching the developer community, but what can we do to reach the average Portlander? And so about a year ago, we started working on another project called CitySync. And this was part of an effort to redesign the city's website which is called Portland Online, and make it more accessible and customizable to individual citizens. And so we started out from a premise that in order to reach people in Portland, we had to connect both to the average Portlander, but also to businesses. And we needed to do so in a way that provided an element of customization to the end user. So this is a demo that we finally created about 2 weeks ago. I'm going to walk you through what we have set up. So you can see with the basic landing page, you have a choice between signing up as a resident or business owner, and you can obviously create separate accounts as well if you're both. And we'll start with resident. So now you can say what you're interested in, and we'll be adding more sort of categories as time goes on here. Let's say city government, public safety, and community. And then we have one other page, which is your neighborhood, so that we can try and tailor the data that we're feeding you as well as the services to a very local level. So this is an example of the St. John's neighborhood in Portland, which creates a customized experience for the average resident to engage with the city on a number of different things. So it's if you look at the main sort of center page here, it's actually streaming different types of news at the local level, whether from local publications, from the city itself, and also from social media. There's a calendar over on the right-hand side of the page here, talking about some upcoming community events and things of interest within the neighborhood. Now, if you look over at this Your Alerts section, it talks about things that are potentially hazards, public safety issues, disruptions to transit, so you can get it at a moment's notice. So in the morning when you wake up, you can check this out and say, okay, what are some of the things that are going to impact my morning commute? Now, if you look down here, it says your water bill is due soon. So again, a reminder of upcoming payments made to the city. And we're also adding some services as well that will allow people to actually connect with individual bureaus and then take care of the payment process right online. Now, we're also creating a section that allows people to find local businesses, the Shop Local widget over on the far right. And that essentially allows people to look at within their certain radius of their home where they can find different local businesses as opposed to chain stores, which, it's pretty easy to find them. There's a lot of marketing around them. The small businesses oftentimes have trouble reaching their customers. I'll just quickly show you the city status page. And this is to incorporate some of the work that's going on with the Portland Plan, which is looking at different policy-related changes in Portland over the course of a 30-year period. And it's focused on a bunch of different issue areas ranging from transportation to transit, et cetera. And so this is a way for citizens to provide input and feedback to the city in these areas. Then that feedback is then incorporated into policy decisions at the city on those areas. Now, the Neighborhood Pulse incorporates an app that we created called Pdx Reporter, which allows citizens to report issues like potholes and different issues around the city, whether it's abandoned cars. And so this shows a real-time map of all those sort of incidents that have been reported by citizens within a certain geographic area, as well as the status, so whether it's been filled or not. And then down here, there's also some information on the local school within the neighborhood, including average student population, number of teachers, et cetera. We also have a business section as well that is similar to this, but has some additional things such as number of new business licenses opened in a given week, and it maps that, as well as some opportunities to look at what are some of the things like crime related to a particular neighborhood that a small business that has a retail presence might be interested in. So with that gives you a quick little overview of how we're essentially taking a market which is captured. That is, we have over 1 million unique page views in Portland Online each year. It's because residents and businesses have to engage with the city. And so we've taken that and said, how can we create data around what the market wants and then tailor that and hand deliver it to the app developers. And so out of this platform, we're going to be doing another apps contest opened up to schools and to app developers to create new widgets and new apps to feed this data as part of the platform to residents and to businesses. So in essence, we've created a platform that allows for some innovation kind of at the very local, horizontal level, where individual citizens can rate data and suggest stuff that should be featured as part of this website. So with that, I'll stop and cede the floor here to the first of our panelists, which is Bob Richardson.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. That was a great presentation. Tough act to follow. I probably should have gotten myself on the docket first. My name is Bob Richardson. I'm Director of Strategic Technology Development for the Information Technology and Telecommunications Agency here in New York. And I just want to take a few minutes today to talk about some of the things that in concrete we have done and talk a little bit about our aspirations as well with regard to using technology to connect with and collaborate with our local neighborhoods and communities. I think probably the most straightforward and most concrete way that I can begin is to talk about a project that was developed and launched during the calendar year 2011. It's called Change by Us NYC. And in essence, it was a collaborative project between the City of New York and a local design build firm called Local Projects, who've been responsible for various other design projects here in the city, including elaborating the algorithm that distributed names on the 9/11 memorial. So we sort of engaged a company whose expertise really is creative and new and interesting ways to engage with communities, not only online but also offline. The way particularly that these two can feed into one another. I think that's probably the thing that I would want to emphasize here, both in the concrete actions that we've taken, but as well in our aspirations. It's really this attempt to make sure that the online and offline interactions are playing into one another such that we are actually taking ideas such as they exist and turning them into actions that have, in fact, measurable, even scalable impact. And so that's fundamentally what's behind most of the projects that we have, in fact, carried out, and also those that we have in mind. So let me just take a few minutes now to talk about Change by Us NYC. The URLs you can see is nyc.changeby.us. It's a collaboration platform that does several different things. I think in the first instance, it's fairly obvious that it asks people for ideas about, well, what? As suggested by the prompt here, how we can make our city a greener, greater place to live. I'm also proud to say that David Bragdon's office, Long-Term Planning and Sustainability, was a vital partner in launching this particular program and has continued to play a really significant role. So David and I have had a really great chance to work on this project together. In essence, then, there's a first prompt. You can participate simply by offering your idea. And it is something that goes into a pool of ideas. We can go through and see a number of them here. Actually, one of the best ways for me to do this is simply to do a blank search. I probably should have warned them that I was going to be doing a demo today. Okay, yeah, all right. It's a little bit slow today. But let me just go down through the page here. In essence, you can see the prompt, right? The idea is to share ideas, to find resources. Really, that's the fundamental point. That on the back end, there are a number of city resources. These are agencies. They are non-governmental organizations or community-based organizations who have committed to responding to people's requests and their ideas and the projects that they've created online in an effort ultimately to engage and enhance the impact that they can have in their communities. So one of the things that the site clearly and straightforwardly encourages are projects. You can see we have nearly 300 projects on the site at this point, and they are located all around New York. You can do a neighborhood search. Let's see, let's see if I can find one in Chelsea. There are a number of projects. So the idea is for local community members to put up projects for the improvement of their environment so that ultimately other people can find those who are similarly engaged with the same interests for the improvement of particular communities and can jump in, join a project, and let's just go to this project. This was a jack-o'-lantern composting project that has had quite a bit of activity. You can see that the page functions much like a Facebook page, a wall. People who've joined the project can offer their commentary. They can direct people to certain pieces of communication about the kinds of successes that they've seen. So it's really this way to, again, create a sort of synergy between online and offline participation. To that end, one of the things that we did during the fall was take some of the initial funding for this and create a mini grants program. It was a really great way to establish the online program, but as well to establish that the online program was having, in fact, genuine impacts in the neighborhoods. So one of the exciting things that we did is we worked with a local organization called the Citizens Committee of New York City. They already have sort of deep roots amongst the community-based organizations, and so they helped us to spread the word both about the website but also about the grant program. We got over 70, I think 70 applications for these mini grants. They were between $500 and $1,000. We ended up granting 19 of them in all 5 boroughs. And the effects were amazing. If I had it here to do, you know what, I think recently, and I'm going to go to our blog postings, also a nice feature of this, it promotes events throughout the city, it gives you other opportunities to apply for other funding, it gives you events to which you can contribute not only locally but elsewhere. You can see here that there are some stats about the grant winners. Overall, we have almost 2,500 users, nearly 300 projects, nearly 3,000 ideas, 1,100 resources, or I'm sorry, 111 resources. But here is, I think, really the payoff. You can see exactly what happened as a result of this online, offline, the feeding of energy into these two pieces. We had 19 different projects in all 5 boroughs, 16 different neighborhoods, 611 volunteers on those projects, nearly 4,000 hours of service, 85 trees and processing upwards of 4,600 pounds of food, 4,700 pounds of yard waste, in 18 different community gardens. So you can see, right, even from this very new project, with the participation of long-term planning sustainability and the way in which it encouraged our collaboration with other community-based organizations, with city agencies, we were able to have real, measurable impacts that at the same time are the kinds of things that we can observe, that we can learn from, and maybe even be able to adjust city policies according to the kinds of capacity that our citizens are able to contribute to the efforts, really, in the name of the public trust. So I think this is projects that we've done recently. We have another round of mini grants that are coming up in the spring, and there's a lot of interest around that. You can look hopefully for an article in Fast Company about it. We also have been encouraged by the fact that on the back end, it has really established a series of connections that followed from the running of the program. So we now have a greater connection to idealist.org, I'm very proud to say. There's been a lot of interest now from foundations in what it would mean to establish further both online and offline community collaboration programs. And it's also drawn city agencies closer together on the issue of engaging communities. So I'm also proud that Change by Us has also had the effect that fundamentally it's drawn together the Parks Department with Million Trees, with long-term planning and sustainability, Change by Us, the program. And we're going to be holding a convening called Grow Our Grassroots in February that has already, I think, maxed out at its capacity of 250 people who will gather together offline at Brooklyn Borough Hall for a day-long convening wherein there are seminars, both about how to engage people online, about capacity building, about fundraising, both also about very practical environmental facts about how to care for a tree. So I think the effects have been really, really amazing. And so in essence, you know, the city of New York is taking this as a sort of first shot across the bow about the kinds of things that we're interested in doing. It is certainly the case that we're engaged in many of the same kinds of activities whereby we're providing certain data set information and encouraging our app community or our tech dev community to work with those. But at the same time, we're wanting to try to, and this is to Skip's point, trying to engage a wider swath of New Yorkers in what is fundamentally this project of civic innovation in the name of public trust. So again, you can sort of see the fundaments of the projects that we want to continue to encourage. And I know that Andrew will have more to say about the sort of strategic vision that we've been working on even together. And so I take this as a sort of example of the kinds of things that we are continuing to work on and continuing to develop. So I'll hand it over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I'd like to introduce Jeff Marreth, who's the Senior Advisor to the Office of the New York Public Advocate. Jeff?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So if the theme of Bob's discussion was about innovation, I think I'm going to take it a little somewhere slightly different and talk a little bit about opportunity. So I work for what we like to call sort of like the meanest, leanest office here in New York City, and you can maybe make the argument that it might be the leanest in the country when it comes to government offices. We are one of 3 citywide elected offices here in New York. That means we have about 8.4 million New Yorkers who are our constituents that we're responsible for. We have about 40 staff. That means that every staff member is responsible for over 200,000 New Yorkers. So you take that and you look at the economic climate today, and as all of you know, government budgets are shrinking, right? Our office, I think 4 years ago, had twice the budget that it had today. And that's not unusual. And a lot of offices across the country, you're seeing government offices and budgets are shrinking, yet at the same time, the demand for services is increasing, right? Populations are going up. Also, as technology is becoming more prevalent, people expect more. Right? It used to be that you might just receive phone calls to your office requesting information. Now you've got phone calls, you've got emails, you've got people on Twitter, Facebook, from all directions that want help, right? So what do? In my field, we don't have many other options other than go to the technology route. We have to do that because that's the way that we can most efficiently help the most number of people. So I'm going to try and just tell you a couple little stories from my work doing technology here in New York City in the last handful of years. I'm not a tech person per se. You know, at the core, what I care about and what drives me is making sure that things work efficiently and we get sort of the most bang for the buck, do as much as we can with limited resources. So my first point on this sort of opportunity theme is one, now is the time to engage with government. As I said, shrinking budgets need to do more. We have to look towards technology. So we don't necessarily have huge technology departments. My office does not have a technology team. We have individuals who look towards technology for solutions. We need outside engagement. You don't want to sort of rely only on an office to come up with ideas. We want to tap into ideas that are already out there. So just to give you one practical example of why I believe now is the time for technology and why you're going to see rapid change in the government sector in the next couple of years. A few years back, 2009, I was outside government at the time, and I decided to get involved with the Department of Ed here and school board elections. Here we have these things called community education councils. They're the former school boards. There's 1.1 million students in New York schools, 1,700 schools. It's the largest school district in the country, and those parents have to elect leaders. So traditionally there had been traditional voting process, traditional elections, very expensive, as any elections are. With limited resources, folks want education dollars going to teaching, education dollars having a direct impact on students. So what do? Of course, you bring technology into that, and we put elections online. First online public elections in U.S. history. We cut the budget, I think, at least half of what it had cost before. We reached more parents. You know, with anything like this, there are obviously sort of hurdles along the way. But did the Department of Ed necessarily say, we want to be innovative, we want to go and do what no one else in the country had done? Maybe, but more likely we said, the Department of Ed said, look, we have limited resources, we need to do the most efficient thing as possible, so let's do it online, right? You're going to see that across the board in a lot of things that government has done, that now as we have to look at budgets and look at how to do things more efficiently, there is going to be a move towards technology, and there is a need for folks from the outside to get involved, to bring those ideas, and to help government get there. Next point on sort of opportunity is, and I'll use a sort of real world example here. I'll pull up one of the things that we've done, which is our landlord watch list. Just landlordwatchlist.com. And, we don't have a super fancy website at the Public Advocate's Office. We have a Drupal-based site. It'll load up this map, I think, here in a second. It's a simple Google map. But we have limited resources, as I've said numerous times already. And so, of course, where do? We go to open source solutions. And we went with the Drupal website, and what we built here was a basic app, okay? Is there anything really hugely innovative in what we're doing with this app? Probably not, right? I love it. But the reality is that what we did is we said, okay, the housing department's got great data out there on building violations, right? And this is everything from sort of rats to paint that's peeling. How do we make that sort of useful for New Yorkers? Yes, there's already a database out there where you can go and you could look up your building and find all that information, but that's a little tedious. We want to just make it simple and practical. And so the approach was, why would you need this information and when is it coming useful? And one of the quick things that came to mind is, look, in New York, we have a lot of renters. Renters don't want to rent an apartment that is owned by a slumlord where there are a lot of problems. If you can know that in advance, you're going to be better off. We, in the spring, or I guess this was last year, we decided to team up with Craigslist, and you search for housing here in New York, usually rentals are through Craigslist. You have a link now on the Craigslist site, takes you to the landlord watch list. Why would Craig Newmark and Craigslist like this? Well, they don't want slumlords that are advertising on Craigslist. It creates a bad experience for folks. So enable people really easily to find out before they go and set up an appointment and see an apartment, does that building have lots of problems? And then in addition, what we wanted to make sure is that this is not only a sort of a system for alerting people, we wanted to organize around it. We wanted to make improvements. So yes, we could just create a database and put all this data up there, but if we actually rank it, if we put these folks, I'm just on a tab for the Bronx, and if we rank these landlords, and these are actually the worst buildings in the Bronx, if we rank them based on the number of infractions, one, I can tell you the media loves that, right? Media loves any time you do something that ranks and puts a spotlight on bad things. So generates a lot of press, and all of a sudden landlords get highly concerned and take those violations a lot more seriously. So right now I think we have about 180 buildings that have come off our watch list since we first launched it in August of 2010. Is that all a result of our work? No. Do we like to think that the added pressure that we put on landlords helped? Definitely. The other little tool here is, let's say you live in a horrible building. You want to know that you're not alone. Going up against a landlord, and a lot of landlords are own, potentially dozens, hundreds of buildings in New York. It's hard as one tenant to make an impact, even to find that landlord. But if you can go on and you guys can play around with this if you want after the session, but you can go and you can, search in here by landlord. All of a sudden, you're going to pull up the buildings in New York City that are on the watch list that landlord owns. You can team up with tenants in other buildings and add and put more pressure on that landlord. It facilitates community organizing. So basic tool here. At the end of the day, did it take a lot of technical expertise? No. We think it's practical, and I can tell you in the last year, over 250,000 people went to this site. For a small office, we think that's real added value. Another just point to take off of this is later today I have a phone call with the mayor's office in Vancouver, Canada. Vancouver is adopting a watch list. We've made all of our data open source. Our goal here, again, be efficient. We don't need to have any ownership of this. It's a tool. It's an app. So Vancouver will adopt this. They'll make it better. We'll integrate the changes that they do. It's about also sustainability, right? That we want to make a tool here that lives beyond my tenure at the office, that is sustained by the community. If there's a need for this service, if there is value here, folks can go in and they can engage with the open source code. They can propose and make changes and additions which we'll implement. And then this tool lives on. It maintains itself because there's a community of people that find value in it and want to see it continue. So, maybe if we have another of these conferences next year, I'll be able to come and tell you that we've got 20 cities across the country that have watch lists like this. Maybe what we'll find is that the next watch list isn't about housing. Maybe it's about a completely other issue. My sort of message to all of you, if you have creative ideas, look to the government sector. We are sort of new in the technology sphere, right? If you want to make a big impact in a lot of other sectors, the entertainment business, it's going to be really hard. You have to come up with amazing, amazing ideas. In the government sector, where you could make the argument that we're a decade behind other sectors, you can come in, put forward a creative idea. I think that you'll find a number of government offices, especially small offices, interested in engaging with you, and it's a great platform to get your ideas out there and to sort of grow new things. So I'll leave it there and turn it over.
Thank you, Jeff. And our last speaker, Andrew Hoppin.
Uh-oh. I no longer know how to use a PC. Oh, there we go. Excuse me. Okay, I'm going to tell one more good story, and then I'm going to tell you sort of about the everything else of government, because I think there are a lot of, our status quo in government IT is still not nearly where it needs to be. So 2009, in Obama's first month in office, he issued the Open Government Directive, and this was a directive to the federal government to make the federal government transparent, collaborative, and participatory. And we've seen a great deal of technology innovation, especially around opening up data, but also around inviting our participation in the federal government ever since. And by and large, that's been a great story. A lot of great talent went to DC, and we've really looked to the federal government in the government IT sector for leadership and innovation ever since. As we've heard today, there's been a lot of great things happening at the local city level as well. The sort of purgatory, middle, forgotten sphere for quite a long time was the state level. And also in January 2009, there was new leadership in the New York State Senate, and where you might have thought that the Obama administration would see innovation and creative ideas coming into government, if there was anything on the opposite end of the spectrum, it's probably the New York State Senate in terms of expectations. You know, the former majority leader had just been indicted on federal corruption charges. For a long time, it had a reputation of, sort of three men in a room making policy in Albany. You really had to be in Albany, and you had to be an insider to find out, to actually get involved. So the Senate's website was literally static HTML. If you went there, you'd see a smiling picture of the Senate majority leader, and that was about it. Over the next 2 years, we put together what we think at the time was a pretty cutting-edge Gov 2.0 website, and it really centered in particular around openness. Our version of the Open Government Directive was transparency, efficiency, and participation, because we, as Jeff alluded to, had terrible budget pressures, and we really wanted to save money, not spend more money in order to innovate in technology. So government efficiency was a big part of what we were doing as well. So we created a program called Open Senate after relaunching the whole website, and this allowed you to do things like go in and find out how much money I got paid, literally look up every penny that the Senate spent. This is our version of an open data portal, which had a lot of that sort of data. We also created a legislation search site, looked and felt a lot like, frankly. That was sort of our model for how easy we wanted it to be to look up and find out what were being considered that we would then live under as New Yorkers. So where before you had to go to a website that looked like it was out of about 1995 and literally pay thousands of dollars in order to get access to up-to-the-minute information about what was happening on the Senate floor, marry and find out bills that relate to marriage equality, for example. So in the Senate, this is really transformative, and we feel like it was sort of a holistic success, in part because we did this as a new political leadership under Democrats in 2009, and now we're under Republican leadership in the Senate in 2011, and all of this work has been continued. So this is really, I think, underscored that it's not a political thing, it's not a partisan thing. Openness and efficiency and giving people the ability to participate more in their government is really just a good thing holistically. We also allow people to comment on every bill, which was a first for a legislature, using Discuss, et cetera. And the final good part of the story, I guess, is that we saved over $1 million off of the historical annual baseline budgets for technology in the Senate. So we also showed that this could be done at low cost, again, by using open source software, by recruiting the kind of talent that knows how to do this. And so I am going to now just quickly go into sort of the other side of the story. I think there's a lot of good things happening at the city level, as we've heard. And we'll just quickly zip through a couple of the good stories here if they'll load. And then I'll quickly take you into, well, let's see if I can pull this up. What I think is the reality of most government IT, which looks a little bit more like this. This is sort of how most technology projects in New York are still managed. We're talking about spreadsheets, and we're talking about systems that really don't feel like contemporary Web 2.0 experiences for software development. And we think we need to change that. It's great to have these forward-facing websites that engage us as citizens and get data out there, but we really want the innovation to happen, the rule, not the exception in government. And so we think the ways to, we're working at the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications in New York at really systematizing innovation. So what that might, this is very much in the formative stages, but what it might look like is finding a application, streamlining the demoing and the testing of that application. So if Jeff and the Public Advocate's Office, Skip and the City of Portland come up with something innovative that works there, we want to be able to quickly find out about it and quickly test it and quickly deploy it here in New York rather than having to reinvent that wheel. We also find that we need new talent. We need people like you who, by and large, come from the entrepreneurial technology community to actually come into government, not necessarily as civil servants, but to come in for specific projects when we have specific expertise. And in the entrepreneurial tech community, we're really used to leveraging off of each other's ideas, and in many cases off of each other's code. And again, that's not really the culture or the expected way of doing things inside government. So we need your talent. We're working on a program to more called Spark, which we'll hear more about in the next couple months, which is really dedicated to engaging people like you, literally hands-on in New York City government IT projects. And then we want to collaborate with people inside and outside government when we're developing something new. So we've got a new site called nycshare.org where we're literally doing open collaboration around these innovation projects. So even if you don't work for the city, you're able to actually see what we're working on and get involved and weigh in. And similarly, those of us who do work in the city are able to reach out and get input and help on the projects that we're working on in a very open, collaborative way. It's sort of the civic technology extranet for New York, if you will. And then finally, we need to make it much easier to host these applications. It's a very laborious process traditionally in outside government to deploy something new. So we're working on adopting public cloud technologies to make that a lot easier. And then the sort of completion of this circle is, as Jeff alluded to, again, contributing code. So if we come up with something here in New York, contributing it back so that it gets used and reused in other cities, as Jeff is doing now with going from New York to Vancouver. A couple of places to look to for this sort of reuse and innovation that I want to highlight in particular is the GitHub. We're now up on GitHub with github.com/City of New York, where you can find the code that we're working on. And also the Civic Commons Marketplace. Civic Commons is a new nonprofit which is dedicated to helping governments share software. So in order to propagate innovation faster from one place where something works to another, and also to save money, because it's ours to begin with. We paid for it with our tax dollars. We really shouldn't have to, in our view, continue to keep buying the same thing, let alone keep reinventing the same wheel. So marketplace.civiccommons.org is a place where you'll find out what governments are doing in terms of software innovation and see them actually sharing and collaborating on software projects. So with that, I thank you, and we'll turn it back to Skip. Great.
Thank you, everyone. I think what I'd like to do now is open the floor up to questions. I have some questions of my own, but I think we can shelve those for a little while and let the audience get at some of the panelists here. A lot of interesting issues raised today. All right, any questions? Maybe it's still early. Oh, in the back, yes.
Is there any evidence the open data initiatives have resulted in increased voter participation?
It's a good question. My background, I've done a lot of work in sort of civic engagement and specifically voter engagement. I don't know of any research actually that's been done looking into that. I think it's something that I hope that somewhere out there there's a foundation or an academic institution that is looking at conducting some of those studies, because it's important information that I think we all need to know. People make the assumption that there's a connection there. But I haven't seen solid research.
I guess I'd say that that'd be great, but maybe it matters less whether it's not about anymore just turning out to vote, although certainly more than the 12% who did participated in one of the midterm elections in New York recently should be turning out. But I think rather than electing an elected official and then throwing responsibility for managing our community over the wall to that elected official, a lot of these projects are about saying that we have an opportunity to engage in the governance of our communities 24/7 in an increasing diversity of ways, and leveraging the skills and the interests and the concerns that we have to actually making our government better. And in some sense, I think that elected officials and civil servants are becoming more sort of curators of the process of governance and of the information that is necessary for that governance. And we actually are the users of and increasingly the creators of that information. So while I love voter turnout, I'm even more excited about how open data can actually cause us to be governing ourselves in a more sort of real way with the help of government.
Yes.
In terms of the different projects that all of you have been involved with in open government, there have been some projects that you sort of threw open doors and like people were lining up around the corner to participate, and others just kind of fell flat. And if so, did you notice any patterns that made you sort of suspect this type of project is going to be, heartily embraced and with lots of users and lots of code churning out there? And these
Yeah, I actually have a good comment on that one. So when we launched Pdx Reporter, which was our Android and iPhone app that allowed people to report, traffic-related issues, abandoned cars, potholes, et cetera, we got a lot of press around that when we launched it. At the time, there were some other cities who were doing similar things, so our local media picked up on the fact national media was covering these stories, and I think they ran with it. As a result, we had an increase from, for example, graffiti reports, roughly 10 to 15 a month were received by the Office of Neighborhood Involvement. That shot up within 2 weeks after the app was launched to, I think, 385 per month. So we had this huge resource issue that we hadn't accounted for on sort of the back end, but we had data, more importantly, that we could then use for purposes of budgeting, and the people in the Office of Neighborhood Involvement could then say, we have real analytics that are actually justifying our budget proposal that we're putting forth this year. Here's the market demand. And it was just that our tools before were completely useless, really. I mean, to expect someone to be out and about, see some graffiti, remember the exact location where that was, get home, still remember it after they've gotten distracted, log onto their computer, find a website, it's just not going to happen. Whereas if you can snap it with your cell phone and kind of upload it with your smartphone in a few minutes, and you've got the geo location and everything else right there, it made a dramatic difference. Now you compare that with what we did with the Civic Apps project, where I think initially we thought without a marketing budget, just reaching the app developer community, it's gonna spread virally, and people who are average citizens that don't necessarily get excited and geeked out on data are gonna come flocking to this website that we haven't publicized. And even though we got some good press, it never really translated. And so we had to, with CitySync, kind of go to where the market already was, go to where the people already were, which was on Portland Online. And I think budgets can't market very well. So one more question? Yes, here in the front row.
For Bob Richardson, I really like the Change by Us site. And I was curious if you thought about social media integrating that at all, like Facebook sharing a project or seeing what projects my friends are working on so I can join them.
Yeah, yes, the answer is yes. In February, we're going to be integrating new 2.0 features into Change by Us, and one of them is to see what your friends on Facebook like on Change by Us. So fuller social media integration is part of the project plan moving forward, and even some of the more robust and exciting aspects with full social media integration should be available by February 1st. I think yet further aspects of the same will be available by the summer. So we've got a fairly aggressive plan by which we're drawing on the collaborative efforts of the tech dev community. One of the things that I failed to say while I was speaking was that the code source for Change by Us is also open source. It's listed at GitHub under local projects. It's been adopted by Philadelphia, and we invite any and all improvements to the platform. So in that respect, it's definitely part of that development plan we have, but we are incredibly open to whatever improvements can be made to it by people's building on that code base and pushing it back into the repository. So we're trying to encourage that as much as we can, and we'll see some really exciting changes very soon.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.